Hello guys, Gerb from Stalgard again with another update. This time I have some progress to share regarding terrain generation. In a previous video I talked about Jeroen having created a terrain generator that included erosion. Of course this was amazing work, but it looked kinda boring and bland. In the past weeks I have been working on exactly this. The version of the terrain tool seen in the previous video took global parameters, which are parameters that influence the whole map, and spat out a nice looking terrain. However, we wanted more control. This is why I introduced biomes to the terrain. Of course, this is nothing new. Many other games with random generated maps like Minecraft have biomes as well. For now, I have 3 biomes: plains, hills and mountains. Biomes influence 3 things: the height or elevation of the terrain, the textures and the details on the terrain. Let's look at the beautiful UI for adjusting biomes. If we take a look at the parameters that are adjustable for the mountain biome, for example, in the terrain tab, we see a bunch of high-level parameters that influence the heights outputted by the biome. This is all fairly technical, so I won't go into this, but basically these parameters influence the noise that the biome uses, or more accurately, samples, to create different terrains. Let's change, for example, the power value of this biome to, for example, 0.5. Save the changes and generate terrain. You can see the mountains look totally different, much more like a giant blob. The second tab I added, texturing, concerns, well, you guessed it, the textures within the biome. Of course, a biome can have multiple textures. All these textures are influenced by the elevation of the terrain. For example, here in the mountain biome, I got 4 textures. The grass at the base, the sparse grass, which is the brown texture here, the rocks, which is the gray texture, and the ice, which is the more white texture on top. All these textures have a preferred height they are on. For example, the ice texture layer, if I open this, has a preferred elevation of 0.5. If I increase this a bit to, let's say, 0.7, save the changes and generate again, you can see the ice texture is now only present at the very tippy top of the mountain. There's also a special cliff texture. If you look at the steepness, you can set a steepness cutoff for a cliff texture, and that means that every square meter of the terrain where it is steeper than that cutoff, this cliff texture will be painted on. So if I decrease the steepness cutoff to, let's say, 50, and I generate again, you can see the cliff texture is now on almost the whole mountain. The third tab is details. Details are things that are cosmetics for the terrain without collision. For example, grass, flowers, bushes, and maybe some small rocks, etc. Every biome can have multiple of these detail layers. You can set the appearance, the sizes and the colors. And you can also set requirements or placement ranges. Let's move a bit closer to the terrain so we can see the actual grass. Alright, so now you can see the grass growing on the side of this mountain. You can clearly see an elevation cutoff here. This is determined by the maximum elevation parameter. So if I set the maximum elevation to 0.3, that means that at 0.3 times the maximum elevation, which is 300, which works around to be around 90 meters, the grass cannot grow anymore. If I make this a bit higher to, let's say, 0.5, save this and generate the terrain anew, you can see the grass grows much higher at much higher elevations. You can also see that the grass doesn't grow on this cliff texture right here. This is because of the steepness cutoff of the grass detail layer. You can see the maximum steepness is set to 56. So every square meter that has a steepness of higher than 56 cannot have a grass detail on it. So all these parts make for a much more interesting terrain. The next step for me is to include more terrain information for texturing and detail placement, like water levels and temperature, so we can have even more control of the generator. This tool will of course in the future be available for modders and myth creators. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked the progress and I'll see you next time.